to be able to understand that our only salvation is to have a common interest where everybody is rallying around. We can't
Yeah.
say that we don't have any reason for that. Look at
Yeah.
Israel, for example, a small
Yes.
country in the Middle East building nuclear weapon. And
Yes.
guess what is their justification? That their people suffer in the hand of Nazi Germany. They don't want it
Yeah.
to ever happen again. Six
That's right.
million people, that was a lot. But
Yes.
we have tens and twenties and even not hundreds of millions of Africans that have been massacred. Is that not
Yeah.
enough to say it should never happen again? Let's do everything we can to save ourselves.
Yes.
Do we have a reason to do this?
Yes, we do. I think ideally, um, there are things that we can rally around. But again, because of the fragmentation of what those needs are, it's going to be difficult, not impossible, but difficult. The other thing about it is that, you know, there is sort of the identifying of what the needs are for the diaspora, and then the acknowledgement of those needs from allies, right? So, because we can't do it alone, right? Um, we can't do it alone. When you give the example of Israel, you have the majority of the world supporting Israel. Right? Majority of the world supporting Israel. That is not the case for the diaspora, right? And so that's sort of what I'm thinking. There has to be a unified agenda, but then there also has to be the engagement with allies. And with that engagement with allies, they have to understand that the addressing sort of the issues for the diaspora is not only morally right, but it can actually benefit all. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Because look at, okay, that it will benefit all, it is true. Look,
mhm,
for example, how many computer gadgets that are sold in Africa.
yes,
That is a market opportunity, for example. If you just keep
yeah,
the people poor, they cannot afford to pay anything. That is a
that's
loss
right.
to you that is a producer. So
That's right.
this globalized economy, we must make an effort, of course, talking at the international level now, we must make an
Right,
effort to make sure that people can afford the
right.
tools of the age.
That's
If
right.
they
Yeah,
only live on mere $1, they cannot afford it. So you are losing, I am losing. Now, coming
that's
back
right.
to the African diaspora again, I don't
Mm,
know if it's just because we don't have enough ally. I know we do need ally and we do need people to support us. But have we really done enough? And so that what is lacking is the ally? Because I don't think a lot of people actually like Marcus Garvey at this time. There were some people
yeah,
who didn't like him. I'm talking of people outside, even people within Africa. Sometimes they didn't like him very much. Of course, everybody is a subject to their education that they receive, no?
yeah,
So he, of course, within the limit, he did that, meaning that if we have enough belief in enough reorientation of our mind, we can
yeah.
do a lot. So
Right. But
I think,
it,
yes,
it's
please.
it's interesting because not only are you talking about people who um, from an academic standpoint, because Marcus Garvey, but in addition to all of the other great things, he was an incredible academician. So you've got individuals who are also human, right? And with the human experience come human emotions, many of which include pride, and not wanting to sort of align with someone who isn't necessarily from where they are from, right? So that creates this, division, if you will, and not being able to galvanize people around one cause. It's like, not everybody wants to follow, someone who is American but of African descent, right? Because there is distrust with the with America, right? So it's a really it's simple, but it's also super complex, right? The simplicity of it is that when we help one, we help all, right? That's the simplicity of it. But the complexity of it is that people don't necessarily have trust for individuals who they have seen, or nations who they have seen harm and hurt others, right? So
Right. All right. I get that. We're going to look for a way to build the trust because that is the only way we are going to survive. I
yeah.
was reading this book by the Israeli writer, The 21 Lesson of the 21st Century. That is a very
Okay.
interesting book where the writer was saying that what actually differentiates the human being from the rest of the other animal, comparing human being to the apes, is our ability to tell story, to negotiate. Look at
Yes.
currency, for example. Why
Hmm.
would people organize themselves and go to Africa and dig up a hole on the ground and they give people some worthless paper they call dollars? Who said how many dollar can you put inside that hole to replenish it? Actually,
Right.
it doesn't make any sense in a logical sense of it. But we have a way of putting value in those paper so that that paper is
Yes.
now worth more than the hole that we dig on the land in the Niger Delta, polluting it, killing people, and all of that. So
Yeah.
I believe we need to master our story. We need to be the champion
Oh,
of it instead of
yes.
letting other do that for us. And if we manage to do that, we'll be able to go far. Anyway, so the
Yeah.
question actually I want to ask you is, what do you think it can be the right approach to build the diaspora together as a united body so that we can
Mm.
fight for a common interest? I believe it doesn't solve only the problem of the diaspora, but it also solve the problem of where they are coming from, which is Mother Africa.
Yes. Wow, that is a heavy question. Um, and I do want to sort of touch on what you mentioned about the importance of your story. Because if you don't, or if we don't tell our story, to your point, someone will tell it for us, and they will tell it from their perspective. They will tell it in a way that sort of elevates them, and or it gives them sort of a the most or the greatest sort of presence in our story. And so I think that it is wildly important for us to share our stories. And I see that happening so much more, particularly with the development and the technologies of the internet. We're doing a better job of telling our stories. But in terms of unifying, I think that that actually requires a few things, right? It requires sort of a assessment of themes, right? So if you hear, in the United States, people of color talking about, their greatness, right? And then you hear people in the Caribbean talking about their greatness and hopes and aspirations. And it sounds a lot like the greatness and the hopes and aspirations of people of color in the United States. And it sounds a lot like the aspiration, hopes, and desires of the people of color in Europe and on the continent. And so then you start developing, or you start seeing these patterns and themes. And once you start seeing these patterns and themes, then those themes become the common denominator that communities across the globe, or communities of color across the globe, can sort of embrace and galvanize around and then act upon. And then that acting upon, of course, will then generate and result in impact. So I know that that sort of seems a little bit abstract, but I think that that's how um, change can actually be made on a global perspective. But it has to start with the identification of commonalities and themes and patterns that we're all sort of trying to strive towards. And I think that the younger generations um, are starting to see that when you look at the kids who are involved in wanting to talk about climate change and sort of governmental brutalities and injustices. You see, younger generations sort of speaking to that, and I think that that's part of the work that we've been doing up until this very point, right? Trying to create awareness about the things that are important to us. So I think it's just going to be a continuous process and a continuous chasing of um, of a better life for not just me, but for all.
How can people connect with you? Those who might want to work with you and want to connect with you, because we're also here for the connection.
Yeah, so I am certainly on LinkedIn at KT Clinkscale, as well as on social media, Facebook and Instagram, same handle.
Now, what would be your final thought, very briefly, to conclude the conversation that we have had today? Maybe a message or anything you want to leave the people
Yeah,
with.
what I'd love to leave the people with is a spark of optimism. I think that there has been a tremendous amount of work that has been done to raise awareness about issues that are impacting the diaspora. And there's been a great deal of achievements and accomplishments that we ought to celebrate. And then going forward, there's so much work to do. And one of the things that I'm super excited about is, again, sort of the energy and the expectations and the demands of the next generation to make the world a better place. And so, if we can support them in their efforts while also continuing to advance our own work, things will get better. Won't be perfect, but things will certainly get better.
Thank you so much. I like the optimism. That is very important for me. Thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate the
you.
time.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate you so much.